So we're on Vayeshev, and now we're going to get to know not just Yaakov's himself, but all of his kids, and we're going to start spending some time with Yosef. So we're moving on to the next generation. Right? So it says, Vayeshev Yaakov Ars Megure Aviv. Yaakov stayed in the land where his fathers lived. Right? That's the land of Israel, of course. And then it says, Elah told us Yaakov, this is the offsprings of Yaakov, Yosef ben Sheva Esra Shana. So it begins by telling us Yosef was 17 years old. And what did he do? He was a shepherd, Hayaroa es Achiv Butzon. He was with his brothers, he was a shepherd with their sheep. Right? And then it says, Vuhu Nar es b'nei Bilha v'es Zilpa, Nashe Aviv. It says, and he was a Nar by the children of Bilha and Zilpa. Now the children of Bilha and Zilpa were the children from the concubines, right? The wives who were like the semi-wives. So they were a little bit less important, right? They appeared less important. They came from not as great a heritage. And Yosef, on the other hand, comes from Rachel, who was the greatest of the mothers, and he was spending his time with the children from these two. That's what it says. But it uses the word nar. Nar literally means an adolescent. What you might see, a 14, 15, even a 17-year-old, that what does a nar do? So it tells us, actually later on in the Torah, that he used to spend time combing his hair, so he would look good, he'd look in a mirror. He was interested in how he looked. He was a handsome person, and he took interest in how he looked. He also acted like a nar, which is that one of the big traits of a nar is that they rush in to do things, right? That they don't think things through before they do it, and then they get themselves in trouble. So here we see later on that Yosef tells his brothers and his father all about his dreams, and his dreams seem to be saying that the rest of the family, including the father, will be subservient to Yosef, and they're not so happy about this, right? When in reality, if Yosef had been more mature about it, it would seem that he wouldn't say anything at this juncture. It's too early. Wait until it starts to happen, and then you can say something. But to say it now is really the basis of how he got into so much trouble in his life, right? They end up selling him down to Egypt, as we know, and because they don't like him. He's telling on them all the time to their father, and he's considers himself better than everybody else, and everyone's going to bow down to him. So the rest of the brothers didn't like him very much. As we see when we go on. We get a lot of that from the word nar. So then it says, Vayave Yosef Sedif Samra al Avihem, so that Yosef would go and tell his father bad things about his brothers. Now, his brothers would do things wrong, he would tell on them. Right? So again, it's a sign of a nar, of an adolescent who's really not all that, it seems to be all that mature, that you'd go and do that, because he would then wonder why they were upset with him. Right? And of course it was pretty evident why they'd be upset with him. But Yisrael ohev es Yosef. Yisrael loved Yosef, mikol manav, from all of his children. Ki ben zekunim, because he was a child for his old age. So you notice here it changes the name from Yaakov to Yisrael. Right? It doesn't say that Yaakov loved his son Yosef. It says Yisrael loved his son Yosef more than all of the other children, because he was a child to his old age. And this of course tells us a couple of interesting points. First is that Yaakov, who you'd think would know from his own life, right, growing up, to see that how his father Yitzchak treated him and Esau, and he treated Esau, right? He loved his father. He certainly had a preference for Esau. You'd think that Yaakov wouldn't do the same thing, and yet he goes and he singles out Joseph as being the one most important brother. Now, Yosef wasn't the firstborn, right, which already put him in trouble with the firstborn, who was supposed to be an important brother. And now you have Yosef coming along, and he's like the apple of his father's eye. He's his favorite, and it causes a lot of trouble. So not only does Yosef's impetuousness, right, being an adolescent, and add to it Yaakov's desired to let it be known that Yosef was his favorite, did not put Yosef in well with his brothers. And it goes on. It says, "Va'aseh lo kesonas pasim," and he made for him a tunic that was made in a very fine material, very fine wool. So this is what we call the coat of many colors. Right? But here it just tells you that it was like a very high level piece of material. Vayuru achayiv, and his brothers see it. Ki osa oyev avihem, that they saw that Yaakov loved Yosef more than everyone else. Vayisonu oso, and they hated him. Lo yochlu dibru l'shalom, right? And they couldn't speak to him nicely because they were so upset with him. They couldn't even speak nicely to him. And then we begin a new section, so to speak. Up until this point is really background, right? Who is Yosef? Why is it? What has happened that causes his brothers to seem to not like him? Right? What's his father's relationship? It tells us all that. Now we sort of, the story itself begins, and it says Vihine. Excuse me. It begins with the dreams. Vayichalom Yosef cholom, and Yosef had a dream. Vayeged l'achab, and he tells his brothers, V'yosifu od sonoso, and it caused them to hate him even more. Right? Why? As I said earlier, Yosef's dreams are all that Yosef's brothers and his father will be subservient to him. They're all going to bow down. He had two dreams. One dream of the stars and the sun and the moon, and they're all going to bow down to me. And one was to sheaves of wheat would all bow down to me. And in both cases, it was all of his brothers and his father, which his brothers get pretty angry with, because who are you to come and tell us that not only are we going to bow down to you, but our father's going to bow down to you? Our fathers are the founder of the Jewish people, and nevertheless you think that that's the case. You're a little bit arrogant. That's what they're thinking, right? And he goes through his dreams. He says, here's the dream I dreamt. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field when my sheaf arose and remained standing. And he says, then behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Right? That's how they referred to the wheat. And then the brother said, what, you're our boss? You're going to be the king over us? Would you then dominate us? Right? And they hated him even more because of his dreams. He dreamt another dream and told his brothers. Now already you see there's something wrong. If he has one dream, and the dream is that you're going to bow down to me, and his brothers get upset. So he has another dream, and in that dream they're going to bow down to him. So the only thing maybe he shouldn't tell them, right? Like they shouldn't hear it, because already they didn't respond well. And he says, look, I dreamt another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and all 11 stars are bowing down to me. And he told this to his father and to his brothers, and his father scolded him and said to him, what's this dream that you've dreamt? Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, to bow down in front of you? So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Right? So the brothers became upset because of what he said. So here, these are examples of Yosef being what we would call a nar, being a simple adolescent. When he was anything but a simple adolescent, he was a brilliant person who was very good with people, understood things, but for whatever reason, he decided he had to do this. And then it says, now we have the next scene. Yosef's brothers go out to take care of the sheep, and Yosef's father, Yaakov, calls Yosef, and he says to him, your brothers are out there taking care of the sheep. Come, and I'll send you to them. And he says to him, here I am. And he says, go look for the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring me back word. So I want you to go check up on your brothers, make sure they're okay. They're doing their job, they're taking care of the sheep, and they're okay. And then come back and tell me. So he sent them from the depth of Hebron, and he arrived in Shechem. So off he went. Then here you have an odd story. Yosef is on his way to go find his brothers to see what they're doing. And it says, a man discovered him, and behold, he was blundering in the field. So Yosef's lost. He's lost. He doesn't know where his brothers are. He can't find them. And a man finds him. And he says, what are you looking for? And he says, my brothers I'm looking for. Tell me, where are they pasturing their sheep? And the man said, they have journeyed on from here, for I heard them saying, let's go to Dothan. So Yosef went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Right? And that's what happens. They saw him from afar and on. So this story begins with this man. Who is this man? It doesn't tell us who he is, but the commentaries all do, right? The commentaries say that it was Gabriel Hamalach. It was Gabriel the angel who was sent to him because Yosef was lost. His brothers moved from one place to the next. Yosef goes to find them. He can't find them. And if he doesn't find them, then world history is not going to happen. Well, world history is that Yosef finds them, they sell them down to Egypt, we end up going to Egypt and being slaves there. If Yosef doesn't find them, he doesn't get sold down to Egypt, we don't go down to Egypt. Right? So he has to be found. So God sends an angel to find him and to tell him where his brothers are so he can go find his brothers. So he says, a man discovers him, right, while he's lost in the field. What are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers. The man said, they've journeyed on from here. They've gone somewhere else. For I heard them saying, we want to go to Dothan. So they saw him from afar, and when he had not yet approached them, they conspired against him to kill him. So now the brothers have decided, they see Yosef coming, they say, listen, we're going to kill him. He's a problem for us. He's our father's favorite. We're going to kill him. Now let's think this through. We're talking about the founders of the Jewish people. Right, 11 out of 12 tribes, and they're saying we're going to kill Yosef because we're jealous of him. Right? It doesn't. While the Torah does not whitewash our forefathers and make them seem to be perfect, we know that our descendant, or our ancestors, really were people who were human. They made mistakes. They did things wrong. They tried to do things right, but it happened. Right? Here, it says they're going to go kill Yosef. Right? That's definitely not a good thing. So it turns out there's more to the story than the Torah tells us. The Medrash explains that Yosef, by virtue of the fact that he's told them that not only they, but their father and mothers are going to bow down to him, this was a rebellion. This was a coup. They saw this as a coup, that Yosef was coming in, he was going to take over. Right? You're telling us that all of us and our parents are going to bow down to you. You're going to be the king, and we're going to be working for you. Right? You're staging a coup. And if you're a person who does that, right, that's treason. You have death penalty. So they're going to kill him. That's the rationale behind it, because they saw what he did, and they held a court. Now, according to another medrash, it tells us an interesting story that they had this disagreement that caused them to want to sell him or to kill him. And it says, what's the disagreement? What were they disagreeing about? So it said that when Yosef found his brothers were debating a religious issue that they were actually wanted to do. And that religious issue was, if you kill a cow, let's say you kosher slaughter a cow, and after you kill the cow, you find there is a fetus inside the cow. So can you eat that fetus or not? So the rule is that if you're not Jewish, then you cannot eat the fetus, because there's the cow that's inside of the mother. And the reason is because is that the non-Jews have a law, just like we have. They are not allowed to eat a part of a live animal. Right? You're not allowed to do that. That's considered a horrible, like, savagery to eat a live animal. So if they would go and they would take this calf and they would eat the calf, if the calf was a part of the mother, right? So then you say the calf's dead, even though the calf's alive. The calf is like the arm of the mother. So if you kill the mother, even if the calf appears alive, it's really dead. So you can eat it without killing it. That's if you're not Jewish. If you're Jewish, we have a thing called shechita. You have to kill an animal according to Jewish law with shechita, right? So if they would say then that if they killed the cow with shechita, then the animal that's born from it is considered like the arm of the cow, because it was inside of it when it was killed. So then, if you're Jewish, right, because you can shech the animal, you can eat it, because the animal is shechted, and the fetus inside the mother is no different than the leg of the mother. It's dead, so I can eat it, even though the fetus seems alive. That's if you're Jewish. If you're not Jewish, it's not dead. It's considered alive, because you have no permission to eat it based on shechita. They have no law of keeping kosher. They have a law, they can't eat a living animal. And this animal is clearly moving around, he's alive, so they can't eat it. So the argument, Yosef said that there was an argument going on between the brothers and him. The brothers said, we're Jewish. and therefore we can eat the what appears to be a living animal that we found inside of its mother when we killed the mother, because they're Jewish. But if you're not Jewish, you can't. And Yosef says, we're not Jewish. And therefore they had this argument. So what does it have to do with anything? So the idea was the brothers felt that they were Jewish, they would follow Jewish law strictly and leniently, so that if it was, for instance, that they wanted to eat this animal, they could eat the animal, because they decided they were Jewish, and the animal was killed according to kosher Jewish law. Right? Yosef says, you're not Jewish until the Torah is given. Until that point, you can't eat this animal. Right? That was the argument. So it really is much more to it. Right? The real base of the argument is, are they considered to be Jews or not at this point in history? Because most of us agree that the people who we call Hebrews were not Jewish until the Torah was given. When the Torah is given, then they can be considered Jewish. Because then we all are Jewish. Because without a Torah, what kind of Judaism do you have? You have no Torah. You have no basis. You have no laws. You have no concepts. So that was the argument. They said that, and because of that argument, and the fact that they felt that Yosef was rebelling against their father, he was judged by the court of his 11 brothers, and they said he's going to die. We have to kill him. And that's why they did this. Now it says that at first they were going to literally kill him. And then along comes Reuven at the bottom of this page, right? It says Reuven heard, and he rescued him from their hand. Reuven comes and he saves his brother Yosef from being murdered by his brothers. And he says, let's not strike him mortally, let's not kill him. And Reuven says, shed no blood, throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but put no hands on him, intending to rescue him from their hand to return him to the father. So Reuven says to himself, look, I got to save my brother. My other brothers are going crazy. You can't kill him. So he gets them to throw him in a pit, right? And at least in the pit, he's there, he's stuck there, but he's not dead. So then when the brothers leave, I'll come and get him out the pit and send him back home. That's what he says. But if you read closely, where it says he throws him in a pit, it doesn't have water in it. That's what it says. Because a pit with water, of course, he'll drown. So the commentaries say it doesn't have water, but it had snakes and scorpions. So then if you take a person and throw him into a pit with snakes and scorpions, you're going to die. If there's snakes or scorpions, they're going to bite you. And then you'll be dead from the poison. So what good was it for him to say, okay, I'm going to send him into this pit rather than kill him, when he's just going to get killed in the pit? So how does Reuven actually help? It doesn't seem to help. So the commentaries explain that it's as follows, that when Reuven throws him into the pit, it says that there's snakes and scorpions. Snakes and scorpions are animals, and animals don't have free will, right? You can't have a dog say, I want to be a cat. You can't have a cat say, I want to become a female cat, now I'm a male cat. They have no mind to think abstractly. They can only think simple ideas. Right? That's all they're able to do. They can't really go beyond that in their thinking process as an animal. It's just so far, right, that they can go. A human has the ability to go much further with their thinking processes, and they can understand logic and morality and free will and so forth. With Yosef, when Yosef is thrown into this pit with snakes and scorpions, it says the following: if they wanted to kill him, God was going to intercede. In other words, Yosef had to live. Yosef had to go down to Egypt, because that was the fulcrum that sent us all down there. If it wasn't for Yosef going to Egypt, we wouldn't go to Egypt. And we don't go to Egypt, we wouldn't come out of Egypt, we wouldn't have gotten the Torah and so forth. By virtue of the fact that Yosef went to Egypt, it was an important thing for the whole world, not just for Yosef. So therefore, he had to go to Egypt. So when they decided they were going to send him put him in a pit with snakes and scorpions, God can control the snakes and scorpions. They don't have free will. They live by instinct. So God gave the snakes and scorpions an instinct that they shouldn't bite Yosef. So they didn't. Right? Because they have no thought process. They just do everything by instinct. So therefore, when it came to God stopping a human being from killing Yosef, that's not so simple. Because the human being has free will, and God doesn't want to take that away. But an animal doesn't have free will. So that he could go and do this to an animal, and that would be fine. Right? Because the animal doesn't have the free will to be able to act in the way that it should, while a human does. And that's why they threw him in the pit. By throwing him in the pit, they were saving his life. That's really the idea. All right, so this rest of this page goes on to discussion of now they're going to take him out of the pit and sell him to the Ishmaelites, the Arabs, and they're going to take him down to Egypt. Right, so it says that this bunch of Arabs came by with spices, and they were taking spices from the Middle East down to Egypt. So they asked them, would you take Yosef with you as a slave? And they said, sure, they would, and they did. Now the Gemara says it's a very interesting thing that it was not normal that there should be a caravan of spices going from Israel to Egypt. It wasn't normal. That's not how spices came. Spices came from Africa, and they would go to Egypt. So why did this one come from Israel and go down to Egypt? It says because Hashem wanted that the righteous one, Yosef, when he's traveling to Egypt, should have a good fragrance. So you say, big deal, good fragrance. Well, what if he went down there with tar? With a group of Arabs who were importing sulfur, or importing something that smelled bad. Right? So the whole time he's stuck, he has to smell this. But Yosef is a good person. Yosef is righteous. Yosef is going to be the next leader of the Jewish people. I mean, God knows this. So God made it so that if he has to be sold down to Egypt, to be sold down where you have at least a good fragrance, so he doesn't have to have the bad smell. But he's still sold. So you'd say, like, what do we care? He's being sold as a slave. He has to have good fragrances. Like, forget the fragrances. Don't sell him as a slave. Like, it seems like, we're celebrating, that you made a nickel, but it cost you $10. Like, it doesn't do you any good. Like, you're saving Joseph. He's becoming a slave, but you want to give him a good fragrance. So here, we understand from the Torah that even when you're doing something for somebody, right, you can't say to them, look, I'm helping you out. I got you a scholarship. I paid for this. You didn't have to pay full shul membership or school tuition or whatever it was, right? And then you are now indebted to me for doing this. That's not how it works. Right? That's how the Torah sees it. The Torah sees it that a person, right, goes and they do the things that they're supposed to do because of who they are. And Yosef went down to Egypt, right? He was a good person, but Hashem wanted that it's not enough for him just to go down to Egypt and live. Because he was a good person, Hashem wanted that he should enjoy his trip. It should have a nice fragrance as he goes down. So it says that's why it says that they had spices. Okay, so that's the Arabs coming to take him down to Egypt. Now, the brothers are stuck. They have to now go back and tell their father, whose favorite son was Yosef, that his favorite son's not going to come home anymore. So they decide they're going to lie to him. They're going to tell him that he got killed, and not that he was murdered, but that he was killed, and he was killed by an animal. And the animal can't, right? Because the animal has no concept of right or wrong. The animal just comes and he kills him. And they took the coat that his father gave him, the special coat, and they dipped it in blood from a goat. And they brought it and said, look, this is the blood from your son Yosef. He's dead. He got killed by an animal, which wasn't true, right? And it says that because of it, the father, right, mourned his son, and it says that he never could get past it. Like normally, if you mourn for someone, a grandparent or someone, right, it affects you, but it only affects you for a certain period of time. Then you get sort of used to it, and you live with it. It says here that Yaakov never got used to it, that Yosef was killed. And the reason is because Yosef wasn't killed. And Yaakov understood something's wrong, but he didn't know what it was. So he did not believe that Yosef was dead, even though his children told him that he was. And it's right here, it says it. So now he goes down to Egypt, and there he becomes a part of the entourage for Potiphar, who is it says here, the chamberlain of Pharaoh. He's like the head of the house, head of the castle. He's in charge of everything. And this Potiphar takes Yosef in as a slave to live in his house, right? And he has to do whatever Yosef has to do whatever the boss says, but he takes care of him. So that's where the story ends here, and it's like right in the middle of the story we have a commercial, because if you turn the page onto 208, 209, the story changes. No more Yosef, no more brothers, no more Egypt. Suddenly it's talking about Yehuda right? And it says that so to tell you the stories, Yehuda was a judge. Yehuda was a brother of Yosef. He was a judge, and it said that he had two sons. He had three sons. The oldest son married a woman, right? And her name was Tamar, and she was a beautiful woman, right? But also a very righteous and kind person. And it says that she was so beautiful he didn't want to get her pregnant, because if she got pregnant, it would affect her body. She wouldn't look as nice. So he decided to have relations, but in a way where she couldn't get pregnant. And it says that in biblical times, if you did that, you were killed. You know, the Torah said you would die, and he died. So now she's coming and she wants to perform a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah called chalitza and yibum. What that is that there's a mitzvah that if a woman is married to a man, and the man dies and they have no children, then there's a mitzvah for the woman to marry the brother of her husband and to have a child and name it for her husband, because that child is now the closest thing to being the husband. Because the wife is the wife who is his soul mate. It's attached to him by his soul. His brother is genetically very similar, so you put them both together and it's as close as you're going to get, and therefore the guy, he would be born. However, this was not looked at as a very good idea. It's understandable, but it was not a very good idea. It was very destructive. She has to go, and she has to do this ritual. And Yehuda says, look, you killed my oldest son, and I'm not so sure I want you to do it to the second one. But then he says, okay, you can have the second one. And takes the second son, and this one dies right away too. And the Gemara says the reason that he died was because he also didn't want her to get pregnant, so he wasted his sperm rather than using it appropriately. And by doing that, right, he saved her looks, but he put himself in a very difficult situation. In our case, right, it's a fatal flaw. He can destroy everything because of it. And so he goes on. So Tamar now has to find a way to marry the third brother, because she killed the first two older ones. And she didn't mean to kill anybody, but it seems that somehow she must have. So the third brother is too young. So Yaakov tells her, "I'm sorry, but the third brother of my son is too young to marry you. He's not going to do it. So you're going to have to wait." So she decides that she's not going to fall for this. She's not going to do it. So it says that Yaakov was walking down the road one day, and he got this compulsion, a spirit inside of him, telling him he had to have relations right then. Right then he has to have relations. He couldn't control himself. And there's Tamar, his daughter-in-law, but her husband's dead, standing on the sideline. And he looks over to her, and she wants him to give her a blessing right at this point. And he goes to give her a blessing. Right, he gives his daughter a blessing at this stage, right? And so then what happens is you have Yehuda, right? And he won't give Tamar. Tamar is the only one left. Yehuda is the only one left to be with Tamar, because he won't give the youngest son because he's too young. The two older ones she already killed. Right? They already died. So he doesn't want to do any more. So what happens now is he's going along the way from one city to the next, and God gave him a very strong urge to have relations, like a crazy urge. And he sees a prostitute standing on the road. So he goes and he hires the prostitute and have relations with her. He doesn't have any money. So he gives her his silver walking cane that he has, and which he also uses as the gavel in court. He gives this to him, right? So that as the story's going, and he's walking down the road and he sees this prostitute and he has relations with the prostitute. It turns out it wasn't a prostitute; it was Tamar. It was her, and she purposely wanted him to have relations with her so that she could fulfill this mitzvah, which for whatever reason he didn't want to do. He was afraid that his family would die, because two of them did die, and he was afraid that more of them would die, and he didn't want that. So he does it in specifically in this way, whereas that he doesn't have to do that. You know, he actually goes and he goes and he has relations with her, but he doesn't know it's her. He thinks it's a prostitute. And then what happens is she gets pregnant. And now she comes to court because they say this woman is supposed to wait for someone in Yehuda's family before she can get married. And look, she's pregnant. So they say, well, you broke the Torah, you have to be killed. Right? So they bring her in front of Yehuda. Now Yehuda knows that she didn't do anything wrong. Yehuda knows this is the prostitute that I saw. And that she really wasn't a prostitute. She really was trying to have relations with someone from the family, and she did, me. So therefore, he doesn't want to judge her guilty. But in order to tell her that she's not guilty, he has to admit that he slept with a prostitute. This is a great Jewish leader, right? Even though he was compelled to do it, he has to admit it. But if he doesn't admit it, she'll die. She'll be killed. So he admits it. It says that he goes and he admits it, that it was him. She says, she is more righteous than I am. It was me who fathered her child. And therefore she's allowed to have that child because it came from the family. And she fulfills the mitzvah even though Yaakov thought that he was doing something wrong, he actually did something right. And that's what that story tells us. Right, it goes on for a bit, but that's really the whole idea of it. Now we have Yosef in Egypt, and what happens to him. So it says that on 2:12 and 2:13, right, that Joseph was brought down to Egypt. Potiphar, who worked for Pharaoh, right, the chamberlain of the butchers was there, who was a prominent Egyptian, purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. So now Potiphar owns Joseph. Right, so Joseph's going to work in his house. And Joseph became a successful man and remained in the house of his Egyptian master. His master perceived that Hashem was with him, and whatever he did, Hashem made succeed in his hand. Joseph found favor in his eyes, and he attended him, and he appointed him over his household, and whatever he had to be placed in his custody. So here he comes, and what happens? Potiphar's wife wants to have relations with Yosef. Yosef is a handsome guy, like I told you, but he can't have relations with somebody else's wife. It's a big sin. She has a prophecy, by the way, that children with Yosef will come from her. So she thinks he'll have relations with her and she'll have children, when in reality it's her daughter, Osnes, who ends up marrying Yosef. It says his children will come from her, not directly from her, but from her daughter. So that's what it says. So she understood that. Tamar understood that. So now, Potiphar's wife understood this. Joseph didn't. So she says, Joseph, it's a mitzvah for you to have relations with me, because from our relationship, we're going to fix this damage. And Yosef says, no, it's a sin. You're a married woman. How can I have relations with somebody else's wife? It's not right. And she pursued him and pursued him and pursued him to try to convince him to have relations with her. When she finally saw that she couldn't get him to do it, the end result was, right, that she had to tell on him. And she said, he tried to rape me, rather than the other way around. And because of it, he was put in jail. And now that he's in jail, he meets two characters. Now you have to picture this. One of them is the head chef, and one is the wine steward. And they're both in jail. And they're both in jail because they did something, right, that appeared to be bad to Pharaoh. And and Yosef's now in jail. And they start talking to Yosef about what's going on in his life and in their lives and why. And Yosef finally comes in, and this is what happens. It says, the Yosef walks in and he sees that the face of one of the men is really upset. Right? He looks terrible. So he says to him, why do you look so bad today? And he tells him the whole story, right, of what happens to him, of how he got there, and about the dream he has. Right, so Yosef interprets the dreams. One of the two men are going to be killed, and one of them is going to go back to his original place. The one who goes back to his original place is supposed to warn or tell Pharaoh about this guy Yosef to help get him out of jail. He goes, look what he did for me. But he doesn't. He forgets him, it says. And that's where it stands, that Yosef is locked up in jail. Now you can imagine Yosef's locked up in jail with two guys who are like Mexican drug dealers. Like they're drug dealers. Like they're criminals. He's in jail with criminals. And what's Yosef? Yosef is a tzaddik. He's a righteous person. He doesn't do anything wrong. Even though they arrested him for rape, he didn't do it. So for them to continue doing this and putting him in with those people was a very big, difficult time for him. Right. So that's Yehuda and Tamar. So now you have these men in there, and they decide, that they had a dream. So one of their dreams says they'll be reinstated, and one says they'll be killed, and that's exactly what happens. And it says at the bottom of 2:17, and it happened after these things that the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and the baker transgressed against their master, against the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was enraged at his two courtiers, the chamberlain of the cupbearers and the chamberlain of the bakers. And he placed them in the ward of the house of the chamberlain of the butchers into the prison. The two of them dreamt a dream. Each one had his own dream on the same night, each one according to the interpretation of the dream. All right, Joseph came in the morning to them, and he sang them from beautiful that they were smashed, that they were agri-evid. And he asked Pharaoh's courtiers who were with him in the ward of the master's house, saying, "Why do you appear downcast today?" And they said to him, "We dreamt a dream, but there is no interpreter for it. Do not interpret it. Belongs to God. Relate it to me if you promise." So Yosef says to them, right, tell me your dream, right, and I'll help you out. And he tells them the dream, right, and he ends up telling one of them that you'll live and one of them that you'll die. And the one who lives is supposed to remember him to Pharaoh. And because Yosef says, "I want you to remember me to Pharaoh," this is considered a sin for Yosef. Because a person on Yosef's level shouldn't have to ask someone to intervene. God can do things on his own for him. The fact that he asked a human to intervene showed that he didn't have as much faith in God as he should have. So it says that he's punished for that. But nevertheless, he doesn't remember him, and it's only a lot later that he actually does remember, and he helps him. All right, and then of course one of them comes back and one doesn't. And then it says it was on the third day, it was Pharaoh's birthday. So, a person's birthday is is something that we don't find in Jewish literature anywhere. You don't find in the Talmud, in the Torah, anywhere where it talks about birthday parties, birthdays. This is the first place that we find in the Torah where it mentions that you had a person who celebrated their birthday. And this is why traditionally Jews have often not celebrated birthdays, because the only example that we have in our literature of someone celebrating a birthday was Pharaoh. Right? And we don't want to be like Pharaoh, right? But there's nothing wrong with celebrating your birthday, even though it's not in the Torah. But here you have an example of it where Pharaohs, right, they do celebrate it. Okay, so in the end, right, one of the men get brought back up, and one of them is killed. And it says that on Pharaoh's birthday, he made a big party, and he brought the guy back who was supposed to be back, and he killed the butler who was supposed to be killed. Right? And that's the end. Now that's the entire concept of the selling of Yosef down to Egypt, and it's not an insignificant thing. This really is an example of how to understand free will. When we talk about free will, it's for another day, but the whole idea is that a human being has free will. I can, decide that I'm going to, God forbid, do something wrong which will hurt someone else and cause them not to have the life that God wanted them to have because of what I did. My free will can do that. My free will, or anyone's free will, can affect somebody else's free will as well as your own. So if somebody prays on Yom Kippur and God says you're going to have a good year, and if somebody comes up and shoots him, he's not going to have a good year, he's dead. Right? Because human beings can intervene and affect what God says that it's possible to do. God won't change his mind, but people do. So you find that happens when it comes to this, and that they should hydrate all of their objects is a good thing. So now it was on the Pharaoh's birthday, and it says that he went down to the river to wash. Now the Medrash says that what he was really doing is he was using the river as a washroom, because Pharaoh told the world that he was a god. I'm not a human, I'm a god. And that's pretty well understood. If you look at the archaeological studies, they all seem to show that whenever they find a pharaoh, he was referred to as being a god, not being a human. And because of that, he could do all kinds of crazy idiosyncrasies. Nobody can say anything. So he would go down to meet with the rabbis here in the city, and they'd sit on his head, right? And he would do crazy things. Right? That's the idea, because he do whatever he wants to do. But free will for Yosef was different. Yosef had to go to Egypt. And no matter what, God forbid somebody comes out of Yom Kippur and they get hurt, right? They were given another year, but they're not going to get the other year because somebody intervened. So God is not going to break the laws of nature for that all the time. So, but in the case of Yosef, he will. Because it is extremely important that Yosef got down to Egypt. If he didn't go to Egypt, the whole story of Judaism would be gone. Because he needed to go into Egypt so he could come out of Egypt. That was the idea. So that's what they're referring to. That he did just that. And then it concludes by telling us about the two different ministers, the cupbearer, right, and the meat guy, the butcher, and how one of them is killed and one of them is brought back. And that concludes the end of the Parsha. Right? And the whole essence of the Parsha is that this is the introduction to Yosef's going down to Egypt. And this had to happen. When we talk about destiny in our lives, Judaism doesn't really believe in destiny. It doesn't believe that no matter what you do, this is going to happen to you. It does believe on a national destiny. No matter what we do, we will get the Torah. That's a national destiny. But me, myself, not necessarily. And you see in the Megillah, that Mordechai says to Esther, go up to the king and save the Jews. And she says, no one is allowed to go to stay in the harem with the king without being invited. I can't just go up there. He's the king. He'll kill me. So he says how does it work? So that okay, with the free will, so that he goes in front of the. I lost the track of it. I'm sorry. What was I saying? Get me back to it, and I'll finish it. My mind wandered.
Okay, Esther said she can't go to see the king.
So Esther says she can't go sleep with the king. What happens when she can't go sleep with the king? The Jews are going to be killed. Haman's going to kill the Jews. Right? Because Esther's got to go to the king and say, Haman's going to kill the Jews. She's going to stop him, right? Ahasuerus will listen to her. But she says, if I go to the king, right, and he didn't ask for me, he'll kill me. The king was, he had a harem. He could have a different woman every day. And he didn't ask me to come, so he'll kill me. So Mordecai says to her, listen, the Jews are going to be saved. Either you'll be with them or not. That's up to you. You want to go be the one who saves the Jews and lives through this? You got to go do it. Go see the king. If you don't want to, the Jews will be saved. But you may not be. You may be killed. And that's the idea of the destiny. The destiny of the Jewish people is certain things. We're going to go to Israel. We're going to have the Messiah come. The destination of an individual Jew, unless that individual Jew is so righteous that the world rests on their shoulders like Yosef, then someone's free will can stop you, can affect you. Right? Only if it's something that's so greatly important, God will bend nature to make sure that nothing affects it. So the fact that Mashiach will come. God will bend nature to make sure that happens. But to make sure that I'm there when he comes, that's not necessarily the case. God may not do that. I may or may not. So that's really the idea of how the free will works here. And that's one of the main messages of the Parsha. That this now takes us from the forefathers into the tribes, and is now taking us from the land of Israel into the land of Egypt, where we're going to become slaves within the next few weeks. We have a few more issues that go up, but eventually we'll become slaves. And then we have the whole story of coming out of Egypt. So that's really the basis right here. So we'll stop with that, and we'll continue with it next week.